Hello, I'm going to talk about economics, the economy, capitalism, and stuff like that. And I should point out I'm certainly no expert when it comes to economics, I'm not an economist, nothing like that. And I won't be able to offer any solution or a new system that would be better than the current one. But I will criticize the current system and certain aspects of it, and still offer some suggestions what sort of society we should have instead of like the current one. Let's start with ancient history. For example, in ancient China, they had four classes in society: the scholars, the peasants, the artisans and craftsmen, and then the merchants and traders. So the merchants and traders were the lowest class in society. It says here, there was not a lot of respect for merchants and traders in ancient Chinese society. Though they could achieve significant wealth, they were held in low esteem because they did not produce anything, but rather transported and traded goods made by others. Though traders, merchants, and peddlers were viewed as essential members of society, they were the lowest of the four rungs of the ladder in ancient Chinese social hierarchy due to popular perception of these people as greedy and immoral. It sounds reasonable to me. This is the Wikipedia article on the same topic. The merchant, traders, and peddlers of goods were viewed by the scholarly elite as essential members of society, yet they were placed on the lowest of the four grades in the official Chinese social hierarchy, due to the view that they do not produce anything, only profit from others' creations. Merchants were seen as somewhat parasitic to the needs of all other groups in society, since it was acknowledged that they used the goods that others produced and made their own profits from them. In essence, they were seen as business savvy but not morally cultivated enough to be leading members of society or highly venerated representatives of Chinese culture. And in Europe, in the Middle Ages, it says here, medieval society divided itself between three societal categories that included the clergy, the peasants, and the fighters. Merchants were not considered as part of these three categorizations and were largely discriminated against. The clergy, the peasants, and the nobility considered the merchant as one who was seeking to enrich himself at the expense of society. Meanwhile, the same society increasingly depended on merchants for the distribution of much-needed goods. So, both in ancient China and medieval Europe, merchants were viewed as lower class. But yeah, here it says that eventually, like in Europe, in the late Middle Ages or the 14th, 15th, 16th century, of course the merchant class in Europe grew in power, and in my opinion that's part of the reason why we are in the mess that we are in now. When you say merchant class, you can just mean merchants or merchants like this. It doesn't really matter in the end. I think they are quite similar. And in India, the caste system, they had the Brahmins, they were the priests and teachers, the Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers, the Vaishyas, farmers, traders and merchants. So it was like the third highest class that had the merchants. So it would imply, I think, that the merchants were more valued in India than in like medieval Europe or ancient China, but still they weren't fit to be rulers or anything like that. And below that is the Shudras, the laborers, and then the Dalits, the outcasts. I think we should learn from history and see that merchants, because nowadays, in my opinion, merchants are one of the most valued professions. Like, it's seen as a really good thing that you know how to make money. It doesn't matter as much how you make the money, as long as you know how to do it, you're good, and it supposedly somehow benefits everybody. And I'm not saying that these societies were perfect or that I agree with every aspect of these ancient societies, but in this respect, I think they were clearly way above us. Because the merchants, they don't produce anything. They merely benefit of the work of others. Like, of course, transporting goods, that's work. So I suppose in that sense they do something, but especially nowadays, well, it's not even like the people who sell stuff that are the most wealthy. It's more like the stockbrokers who don't do anything. They just play their international poker and see who wins, and it's the regular people who usually end up losing. And yeah, another thing, of course, is that it's not just the merchants nowadays that are the problem. It's also the political class, because like in well, not necessarily in China, but in India, they were they had the warriors and rulers, and in medieval Europe they also had the nobility that were the rulers and the warriors. Like I think the difference between ancient ruler classes and ruler classes nowadays is that they are not really warriors. Like your president doesn't go to war against the enemy, because like in the crusades and stuff, certain European kings actually did go to the holy land to fight against the Saracens, and they would put themselves at risk. But nowadays it's like Bush or Obama or something, like just tells the dumb workers or the peasant soldiers, like, yeah, go to the Middle East, kill those people, and they don't care how many of their own people die there. So then there's of course the issue of capitalism, or capitalism versus corporatism, or capitalism versus crony-capitalism. Like people who support capitalism, they usually say that crony-capitalism and capitalism are completely different, but I sort of fail to see how. But yeah, I found this short video by some guy whose channel is called Christian Fascism, and he sounds like he's 15 or something, but he's actually seems to be in favor of corporatism against capitalism. And well, I'm gonna play a short clip.
However, it does draw a line in the sand and say, why do you need 3 new sports cars, another golden bath, and a 10th mansion? You don't. There's no reason why that should be happening.
So he's saying that corporatism draws the line in the sand, that why do you need 3 new sports cars and stuff? And yeah, I agree. Like, I'm not terribly in favor of making explicit laws that you can only own this many mansions or this many sports cars, anything like that. But clearly, well, we have a lot of people nowadays in society, some of whom own a lot of property that they don't really need or cannot have the time to really use, whereas a lot of people, then they have problems paying the bills and stuff. So I agree with his sentiment. I don't know if corporatism or fascism or whatever he is advocating is necessarily the solution, but it's certainly an interesting viewpoint on the matter. Then I found a few different articles trying to, explain that capitalism isn't the same as crony capitalism or corporatism. And this is from Forbes, and it's clearly a very objective article supporting capitalism. It says, capitalism is the greatest socio-economic system in human history because it's so moral and so productive. The 2 features so essential to human survival and flourishing. It's moral because it enshrines and fosters rationality and self-interest, enlightened greed, if you will. The 2 key virtues we all must consciously adopt and practice if we are to pursue and attain life and love, health and wealth, adventure and inspiration. It produces not only material economic abundance, but the aesthetic values seen in arts and entertainment. Yeah, like Hollywood and the art world, like, that trans artist who peed in a bottle for 200 days to protest against Donald Trump. That's so beautiful. And so were they like the Renaissance artists? They were capitalists too, or I'm not saying they're necessarily the greatest art out there, but they're generally held in great esteem. So I don't know, this is just like an advertisement phrase. And yeah, this guy Richard M. Salzman, sounds like his name echoes, like seems like it, although he doesn't, well, whatever. And here's, of course, Ayn Rand, the Jew queen of the libertarians. So yeah, here it says, Historically, capitalism is only about 250 years old, a mere flick of the clock hand relative to mankind's total time on Earth so far. Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And then it continues here. Capitalism has been co-extant with the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, and the political revolution, the last of which was realized in the US Constitution, which soon also abolished slavery. So, okay. Capitalism, so the Industrial Revolution was capitalist, at least according to this guy writing on Forbes. So, okay, the working conditions during the Industrial Revolution. Simply, the working conditions were terrible during the Industrial Revolution. As factories were built, businesses were in need of workers with a long line of people willing to work. Employers could set wages as low as they wanted because people were willing to do work as long as they got paid. People worked 14 to 16 hours a day for 6 days a week. However, the majority were unskilled workers who only received about $8 to $10 a week, working at approximately 10 cents an hour. Skilled workers earned a little more, but not significantly more. Women received 1/3 or sometimes 1/2 the pay that men received. Children received even less. Owners who were only concerned with making a profit were satisfied because labor costed less. Factories were not the best places to work. The only light present was the sunlight that came through the windows. Machines spit out smoke, and in some factories workers came out covered in black soot by the end of the day. There were a plethora of machines with not many safety precautions. This resulted in many accidents. The workers only received a break for lunch and a break for dinner. So yeah, capitalism is so great. It's so different from crony-capitalism that they're supposedly arguing. And also here it says that the political revolution that soon abolished slavery. Yeah, sure, it abolished slavery in the West at least, like at least race-based slavery. But now most people are wage slaves, so I'm not saying that's an improvement. It's just more dishonest way of saying it. Like it says, yeah, you are free. You are, on your free time, you are free to choose between Coke and Pepsi, but yeah, you're still basically a wage slave unless you got like a really fancy job that also pays you well, and you can take liberties and whatever. So yeah, I'm not buying it. Like legally you're not a slave, but practically you are. So it continues. The question of what is capitalism exactly, and likewise regarding its main rivals, what is statism, socialism, social democracy, communism, fascism, or corporatism, shouldn't be a matter of mere semantics. These are real political problems affecting real people, whether for good or ill. Political systems are free, unfree, and oppressive or mixed. We cannot legitimately make up terms or equivocate, i.e. switch meanings from one argument to the next to evade or twist the logic about these political systems. Okay, so that's it, nothing. Capitalism has been blamed for the Great Recession of 2007-2009 and for the financial crisis bailouts of 2008, but it's not capitalism, but the mixed economy and corporatism, cronyism that did it. We've had corporatism in the US for roughly the past century, and it's getting worse over time. It's also the system we've seen in Europe since at least the time of Germany's Otto von Bismarck, who launched the womb-to-womb welfare state in the 1870s. In the interim, of course, Europe also imposed communism, socialism, and fascism. The result we know was mass murder, world war, and the continent-wide destruction of wealth. And then capitalism's greatest intellectual champion, Ayn Rand, blah, blah, blah. And there's just the recognition of individual rights and there's a banishment of physical force. Like, yeah, individual rights is just, it sounds good on paper, individual rights, but it's basically just like advocating this like subtle kind of social Darwinism. It's just, this guy has more money and better social status than you, so it's because he's a better individual. Like, no, it's bullshit. So I'm not gonna read the whole article, I'm just gonna read some more interesting bits. In fact, capitalism And this is from the next page. In fact, capitalism is the system of rights, liberty, civility, peace, and non-sacrificial prosperity. It's not the system of government that unjustly favors capitalists at others' expense. It provides a level legal playing field plus officials who serve as low-profile referees, not arbitrary rule makers or score changers. To be sure, capitalism also entails inequality of ambition, talent, income, and wealth, because that's how individuals and firms really are. They're unique, not clones or interchangeable parts as the egalitarians claim. Well, I'm not a capitalist, nor am I an egalitarian. I think both ideologies are bad, okay? Capitalism is the political system which ensures that innocent economic power, i.e. the power to produce, isn't mixed with force to become invalid political power, i.e. the power to loot. It's the system that separates business and state for the same good reason that it also makes sure to separate church and state. Neither of the two recent political movements, Occupy Wall Street or the Tea Party, seem to fully grasp this. Blah blah blah. Those who speak of crony-capitalism use a smear to blur distinctions and blame innocence, but let's keep facts and terms perfectly straight. Let's not equivocate. Above all, let's acknowledge that the real culprits in corporatism are precisely those people who pretend to rail against it. The likes of Ralph Nader, Robert Reich, Barack Obama, and their friends in Occupy Wall Street. They all want bigger, more intrusive government in our lives. They are full-throated pushers of the welfare state and social democracy. Blah, blah, blah. So it's just blaming some people. Like, I'm not quite sure what capitalism exactly is supposed to be according to this guy. Like, yeah, a system of rights, liberty, civility, but I don't know, like, for me, like, when I hear the capitalism, I think the word itself explains what capitalism is. Capital, i.e. money or property or whatever, like the highest value in capitalism is to make more capital, to, you know, have permanent growth in your business or whatever. This, in my opinion, is what capitalism means. And these are just like, I don't know, this sounds just like some sort of, like, you know, propaganda or advertisement. Yeah, capitalism is so great, but why can't you, like, you know, explain it clearly to me? What's the difference? Like, here it's just saying that, yeah, crony-capitalism and capitalism are not the same, but what the fuck is it? What's the difference? Like, it just seems like there are two sides of the same coin. Like, you know, you can, or like a dagger or something, you know, you can use dagger for good, or you can use a dagger for evil, but it's still a dead dagger. So I don't know, like, how do we fix this? Like, how do we fix the crony-capitalism and get back to this, you know, supposed good capitalism? How did we get here? Like, who do we put in jail? So, okay, these people, Ralph Nader, Robert Reich, Barack Obama, and by Wall Street, I don't know, like, I don't think they, well, yeah, it says they are culprits in corporatism, so maybe, but yeah, and I hate socialism, I hate communism, so don't get me wrong, but I don't see capitalism as much better. I suppose it's a little bit better, but it's still not good enough. Just get the impression from these people advocating for capitalism is that, you know, like, what we have now is not capitalism. It's the same fucking argument that communists use, that, you know, when you point to communist China or Soviet Union and all the evil shit they pulled, is that, well, that wasn't real communism. Real communism hasn't been tried, so where's the real capitalism that has been tried? And, like, maybe there is some certain countries at certain points of history where capitalism really worked well. But okay, how? Please point to them. What are those countries? What did they do differently? Why did it work? And why did it fail eventually? How could we go back to that? Like, if there was this time when capitalism worked pretty well, it's possible it existed, but I don't know, these advocates of capitalism don't really seem to understand it themselves. It's just, all I see is people who benefit from capitalism, so of course they, want to protect the status quo. But hey, I'm a poor person, so I'm not benefiting from the current situation, so I want to change things. Like, I even remember somebody like, Dave Cullen, I don't know, maybe he's a former skeptic now, once or twice, just laughing like, oh, this guy actually thinks capitalism is bad. Then please explain to me like why those people are wrong, instead of just making the Sargon laugh. And here's another argument, just, don't confuse the free market with crony-capitalism. So yeah, okay, free market, it sounds good. Like, in principle, I'm certainly for, mom and pop stores, regular people having a good idea that will both benefit themselves and their community. They want to open a restaurant, they're good at building chairs or whatever. Like, sure, I'm for that, but how do we prevent them from, creating these multinational corporations like Coca-Cola Company or Starbucks or McDonald's or something? Like, how do we give regular people, regular citizens, the ability to practice their entrepreneurship in peace without being too constrained by the state, but also preventing them from, once they have amassed, being successful in their business, prevent them from using those shackles against the people to basically create this corporatist system or crony capitalist system. I don't really see much of arguments like how do we combat that. Here it says, in American political discourse, those on the side of the sick, poor, and underprivileged tend to favor more federal government intervention and involvement across the board. They see government as accountable. To the people, an instrument rather than like a charity through which a community helps those of its members to find themselves in dire straits. Their account of the free market economy sees it as a pitiless world divided between winners and losers, wherein the winners are unfeeling corporations that put profits over people, devoted only to their false idols, the almighty dollar. In this story, the free market, at least in its purer forms, is fundamentally irreconcilable with the common good. And it's actually quite easy to understand why the free market's detractors believe, almost always in complete good faith, such as easily debunked myths about it. They are confusing the free market with something like its opposite, today's gamed and rigged government-dominated economic system, wrongly represented as and believed to be a true free market economic system. By friends and foes alike, it must be noted. So they're saying the state should not intervene at all in business. It just sounds to me like they want some sort of cyberpunk dystopian system where the state doesn't have much power to tell you how to live, what to do, but the corporations have that power, and you have multiple of corporations. So there's McDonald's and IKEA and all those, they can tell you how to live, and they enforce the laws and stuff. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of big government either, but still I think government in principle sounds like a more reasonable outlet of using guns to force you to do shit than the corporations. Okay, at the end of the article it says, the most effective regulator of corporate power and its excesses, the best guarantee of competitive markets with low entry barriers, is a genuine free market system established on the universally applicable principles of individual rights and respect for contracts and private property. Okay, respect for contracts, I think it sounds good, if we can implement that in politics, if the politicians promise something, before election, if you vote for me, I'm gonna do this or that, and if it can be shown that they did nothing of the sort, then they should be held legally responsible for that. But I don't know, this genuine free market system, it just sounds like, some utopian bullshit. Just socialists who advocate for the socialist workers' paradise. Well, I guess that's like 1920s. Nowadays they advocate for the multicultural LGBTQPI paradise or something. So yeah, I'm not convinced, and if you who are watching this video, I think I'm wrong, I don't understand capitalism, then please explain it to me instead of saying you're an idiot, you don't understand capitalism. Then show me how I'm wrong, what's the truth, all that. I said I'm not an economist or anything like that. I don't claim to be, but I think that applies to like 95% of people in this world, that they don't really understand economics, but a lot of them are they fall victim to the emperor's new clothes syndrome or something, that they just don't dare to admit they don't really understand how many of this stuff works, but they pretend because they just want to seem smart and side with the winners and whatnot. I read some other articles too, and I'm not quite convinced that they actually even many people who want to differentiate between crony capitalism and proper capitalism, they don't really understand the difference either. It's just this ideological, a very rose-colored glasses kind of view of capitalism. Okay, just some examples of how capitalism works. I think this is like one of the best examples. How the Rothschild family, the Jewish banking family of Rothschilds, how they made their money. So during the Napoleonic Wars, in the early 19th century, Rothschild set up a Europe-wide network of messengers and carrier pigeon stations, gathering information that could affect his investments. He soon garnered a reputation for being first with the news. So Jews controlling the news, what a shocker. According to popular legend, when the Battle of Waterloo was being fought in June 1815, other speculators watched Rothschild stocks in an attempt to guess who would win. Shortly after the battle ended, and long before anyone else knew who was the victor, he began selling stocks. Everyone assumed this meant Napoleon had won and Europe was lost. Panic selling ensued when prices crashed. Rothschild bought everything in sight and made a profit. Like, see, I do think that the state should intervene. Like this Jewish banker, he made his profit by hook and crook. And well, I think this whole system of like the stock market should be abolished. Like, please explain it to me why this is a good idea. Like, what the fuck? Why should we allow these people who just gamble with money? They don't produce anything. They don't provide anything new to society. Why should we allow them to have control of most of the wealth in the world? Like, how does it benefit anybody except those people who already have the wealth? So please explain it to me. And like, how is this? Like, this is clearly immoral. So after it, yeah, I think the state should just, lock this guy up. If they had done that, but of course it's the fucking English, so of course they won't, because you cannot expect anything moral from the English government. Like, they will always do the wrong thing. So another example is, but of course this is Crony-Capitalism. This is different from capitalism, but De Beers, the diamond company, they of course have this bit about blood diamonds and how they benefit from bloodshed, and supposedly this company even assassinates people who stone cold kill you if you're getting in the way of their profits. Like, it's not so easy to find anything on Google about it, but I think it's fairly common knowledge, but it's just not so much advertised. Or Coca-Cola company, they are guilty of all kinds of, allegedly guilty of all sorts of human rights violations in Colombia and whatnot. Or Apple, they had those evil sweatshops in China or whatever. This is common practice. So, but this is crony capitalism. It's not real capitalism. Then how do we go back to this, moral kind of capitalism? Please explain it to me instead of just trying to defend this lofty idea that does not exist in the real world. Like, how do we get there? Like, it just sounds like another, a socialist or somebody who believes in some high ideal that only works in the minds of the proponents of the ideology. And of course, there's this thing of like planned obsolescence. I think this is like the greatest example of the system we have nowadays. And it's of course the practice that some companies, they make TVs or cell phones or whatever. They could easily make a TV that lasts 20 years, but they deliberately plan those devices in the way that they will break after 6 years or so. Like, they could easily make them last much longer, but it's not good for their profit, so they want you to buy a new one every few years. Or like, I think iPhones usually last properly like 2 years, and according to my understanding, they actually update to that iPhone to not completely break it, but to make it function not so well, so it pisses you off, but you can still use it if you want, but trying to encourage you to buy a new fucking iPhone. And I think this practice is one of the most like just insulting towards people. And like a few weeks ago, I was not arguing, like mostly we agreed on things. I was discussing politics and social issues with one of my friends, and we talked about the planned obsolescence thing, like how it's bullshit and people know about it, but still we don't do anything about it. And I thought, like, what sort of society wouldn't allow it? And I thought, like, well, National Socialist Germany, I'm pretty sure they would have been against it. Like, it's exploiting the workers. And okay, now that I think of it, probably communism also would disallow this practice, although maybe in communism you wouldn't have TVs anyways, or if you had TVs, there wouldn't be anything there to watch. Well, that's true nowadays too as well, for the most part. Well, okay, in communism you probably wouldn't have so much advertising, it would be just propaganda. Well, okay, I guess also in National Socialist Society, but nowadays it's advertisement, which is at least no better than state propaganda. But yeah, like, please explain it to me how we can prevent a system without planned obsolescence, because I think this is like the core, like it goes to the core of modern capitalism. Like, this is how they think. They just see you as a fucking pay pig. And, it really offends me, it pisses me off, and I think these people deserve the guillotine who advocate this bullshit, but it's just assumed, like, oh well. And I don't even mean planned obsolescence in the sense that, technology gets better. Like 20 years ago, we didn't have LCD, flat screen TVs. And yeah, I'm not against making, or like VHS tapes were, the thing in the 80s, but then in the 90s there were DVD, and now there's Blu-ray, and even those are getting sort of old, I suppose. Now it's more like digital media. I'm not against actual development, like, progress in technology. But yeah, even like, I think in like cell phone stuff, they could easily make a much better cell phone now, but I think purposefully, they make every year the cell phone slightly more advanced than the one last year, but they don't want to make anything too advanced, because then maybe they couldn't, top that the next year, so they just take it easy. So like the argument that capitalism is good for invention, I think is bullshit. But yeah, we don't have capitalism, we have Crony-Capitalism. But what's the fucking difference? Yeah, I'm talking in circles, but this is like, what's the fucking difference? And yeah, okay, I'm gonna finish soon, but I just want to point out, like, this guy, Cultured Thug, he's some actual fascist. This is the only video of him that I've seen, but somewhere in the video he says something to the extent that criticizing, capitalists or liberalists or whatever, no, liberals, not liberalists. Yeah, he's criticizing liberals that, they only care about numbers. Like, what's the GDP of your nation? Like, as long as the GDP is high and it's growing higher and, the economy is growing, it's good. It's a good and happy society. But at least this guy, He says like you're supposed to value some other things, and I don't remember if he gave any examples or what his examples were, but certainly for me, like tradition, religion, morality, family, race, culture, pursuit of philosophical and scientific truth, I think those are much more important for the well-being of a society than the economics. Like, of course, you have to have, some sort of functioning economic system for the society to prosper, but the problem nowadays, unlike in the old days, was that you're supposed to have like the scholars or the priests and teachers or the rulers or the clergy. They were higher in social hierarchy, and I think that sounds more reasonable. And of course it doesn't mean that if we had that, everything would be just hunky-dory. Of course, like also priests or nobility and people like that can be corrupted. That's of course true, but I just don't understand like how it's supposed to work. Like we have these people, they just do their best to make money. Like how will that ensure some sort of social cohesion or like enforce moral behavior in people? Because I think it does the absolute opposite. Like, consumerism is a product of capitalism. I just don't understand how you can have capitalism that won't eventually develop into some sort of consumerism. Like, people are just buying crap because the advertisers told them they should buy it, or because they feel so hollow inside, they don't have any other thing, because they don't have religion or family or community. So not really, not nowadays, not in the sense that it was in the past. So they just buy crap, whether it's video games or booze or go see movies or whatever, like, or women buying clothes and makeup and shit like that. How do you separate both crony-capitalism and consumerism from capitalism? Because I think they are interlinked. You cannot really, like, not in the long run. Like, maybe you can have like a moral capitalist system for a little while, but the economic inequality, because some of the capitalists will be more successful than others, so eventually there will be this great economic inequality, and then those capitalists will just make their inequality greater and abuse their power at that point. And yeah, I'm certainly not an advocate of socialism. Like we have, like in Finland, I think we have like the worst sides of both capitalism and socialism. And like the socialism bit is that we have high unemployment, and like you have to have all sorts of permits to start your business, or like for even if you want to be a waiter in a cafe or something, you basically have to get this hygiene pass or something, and it costs money and it's stupid bureaucratic crap. So I'm against that. But like, hey, I don't know like great deal about like what the actual ideology of fascism is, outside of nowadays fascism is just an insult. If this is a commonly held fascist idea that you should have other values or other concerns than simply the GDP or how much money you have in your account, then yeah, fascism sounds pretty awesome to me.